I'll sing as a kid song. Jesus loves me, this I know. For the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. The song is longer than I realized. So they are weak, but Jesus loves you.
What do you have for us?
What do I have for us?
Yeah, what are we talking about today?
What are we talking about today? Well, this is my pregnancy announcement. Just kidding.
Shit.
Just kidding. Not funny. Not funny. Sorry, Mom. We're talking about children.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
Good work.
Children, should we tell them that they're going to hell if they don't believe in God or not? And how do you talk to your kids about spirituality and faith and stuff and
Yeah, I dig this.
deconstruction and et cetera, et cetera?
Well, we have two different vantage points. I'm a father
We
of
do.
3.
And I'm a mother of none, except all the men I've dated.
I like this version of Sadie. This is making me laugh. Yeah, so what do you think about? I mean, I'm in it, but everything is interesting from like you're in an idealist perspective of like what you would do versus what you are doing, and not to say that's the same or different.
Right.
But I'd be more than happy to share my thoughts in application. But before I do, like, what do you
What
think?
do you mean? We should start with you since you have the children.
All right,
and
let's start with
if I like start and I'm like, maybe these are the things these are the values that I have. And you're like, actually, that's a horrible idea. This is the. I want to start with you. You have the experience.
I couldn't disagree more.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm. Even by the time this podcast comes out, things could change. But like at this point, like Knox, my oldest, he's 10 almost, is like, I don't believe in God. So is what it is. My middle child, Josephine, 8, is like, I definitely do. The reality is she's like, my brother said he doesn't, so I'm going to be the opposite of this.
Sure.
But maybe she does. I don't know. She prays at every meal for us. She's like,
she's your pastor.
She's
of
the pastor.
church,
She's like,
your,
can I pray?
Yeah.
The end of the nepotism episode we did, Joe will be the one that takes over.
Love.
But she's like always the one that wants to pray, and her prayers are very sweet. Grace obviously speaks in tongues every day.
Sure.
But I think it's interesting. Like for me, I am very, in our dynamic, being a blended family, like one household is pretty non-religious.
Okay.
I'm pretty vested in the religious system and both that and my beliefs. Feel very strongly about them. But I also want to create space for like my kids to own the things they believe. And so both Annie and I are very open to say like, here's what we believe. Here's what we think to be true. Like, let's talk about it. Let's disagree about it. But we want to create the space for them to like curate their own beliefs. One thing, I think this maybe fits into the conversation. One thing we just started doing is like reading the Bible to our kids, and like not like the kids' Bible anymore, but like the actual Bible. And we've like read through the kids' Bible, and they're like, we want to hear like the whole story. And it's been really interesting, like their questions and their thoughts. And they're like, if we don't do it, which some nights I'm like, I'm too tired, I just don't want to do it. And I'm like, I'm going to bed. They're really bummed out about it. Now we haven't got to Leviticus yet, so maybe, but they're like really interested in it. And so I am, as a parent, I'm like, I don't hide that I have beliefs. We also don't force our kids to believe what we believe. Now, there could be a lot of debate on this. Like we do say like, you're going to go to church with us, like, cause they're 10, 8, and 3.
Yeah.
So it's like, we can't leave them home alone, but like the reality is they miss a lot of things because of sports. And when they're old enough to make the decision, like, I'm not going to force my kids. Like, I'm not going to be the person that's like, you're under my rules till 18 and you have to come. Like, I'm not going to make my 15-year-old kid come to church if they don't want to. But for this season, it's like, logistically, they have to.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone heard this, but a door somewhere
slammed.
Very loud. So I don't know. Like, I want, at the end of the day, when my kids are adults and they have their own kids and they have families or whatever they're doing, or maybe they don't have that, whatever that looks like, when they're just grown, like I want them to feel like they chose to believe what they wanted to believe. And I'm almost certain that there will be levels of things that I've taught them. Like belief is not static, right? And so think about when Knox is 20, that's 10 years from now. Like things will have shifted. So he will probably deconstruct things that I have deconstructed or things that I've believed. And so it's like the idea that like I've somehow arrived to this perfect undeconstructible faith. Like I think I'm going to challenge my kids to do the same thing I did in my teens and 20s and now 30s, and I'll hope to do into my 40s and 50s and beyond.
Well, that settles it.
Yeah. This is a short episode.
I think
play the music.
I think that is, it sounds very healthy and very like caring about your kid over caring about like their doctrine, which is great because I think that's what we try to do to adults. Yeah,
we try to love them because of the doctrinal impacts, not because of who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't have children background. I don't have children. I don't have a relationship. So this is like decently far removed, unless, I mean, everybody's one slip up away from a child, but
all right.
I don't
put
this aspirational. The likelihood is very slim, but I do know that I want kids one day. I think that a lot changed once I realized that I don't believe in hell, because I think a lot of people have the fear of their like child's salvation, because at least in the church that I was born into and raised up in, there was this because they believe that baptism is essential for salvation,
right?
But the tension to manage is like, when does that become appropriate? Because they didn't believe in infant baptism.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really an expressed age of like, how old does this child have to be to understand the decision that they're making? But also they believed that if you died, you'd go to hell if you weren't baptized. So there was like a very interesting, a lot of gray area whenever you try and like believe something that problematic. Someone would say.
To have that, but I mean, I don't know if this is like the term for it. Maybe it's a Catholic thing, but my mom kind of grew up Catholic, and my dad Lutheran, but they would call it the age of accountability.
Yeah,
like,
that makes sense.
The idea that, and it was so funny. I used to like talk to him all the time, and I was like, "So when is it though?"
Yeah,
I'm like it's they'd be like, "It's 13." It's like, where do we decide this?
Mm-hmm.
But this idea that like at some point I can't be held accountable for my unbelief because I'm just a child.
Mm-hmm.
But then at some point I have to make the decision for myself, right?
Right. So I didn't have that like as an option as a child with. I think a lot about my inner child, but also myself as a child and the effects of the spirituality that I was experiencing, and it was super, fearful.
Yeah.
But where I'm at now is like, I don't believe that, like, I don't need to proselytize to my children because I'm not fearful of like, if they die, they'll go to hell. So like that has been a huge change, and I know that it's not like something easy to just like get over, because you always, you want to raise up your child the way that they should go, and when they're adults they will not part from it, or some proverb.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I think that my personality now will carry over into motherhood, I hope, in the way that like I'm generous with how I share, and how like I think that the work I do is impactful, and like and it's a joy for me to share that with others.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, like, it should be their choice. I think that I want the conversation to be kid led, but I also do plan on pretty intentionally like introducing them to not only Christianity. Like I would love to, this past like Passover, I'll have a Passover meal with my friends, and it might not be like the traditional like Jewish model or like the food, but it's like we're intentional about the day and about like spending it together. And then I also like I teach English to a family from Afghanistan, and we've been together for 2 years now. And so at this point, like I imagine that we're lifers. Like I don't plan on like they are an aspect of my family now. And so I imagine that as I one day have kids of my own, that like they will be involved in some way.
That's cool.
And so I would love to like celebrate Eid or Ramadan with them every year. So like I do kind of, my hope is to like put them in scenarios to where that they can be spiritually influenced or just experience like different things.
Yeah, and even back to that family, like one thing interesting is like you haven't like tried to like radically convert these people either, right? Like that would be something that like, and if hell was the main driving factor, you'd probably feel some sort of like moral obligation, right? To be like, I have to do this, and if I'm not, I'm like doing a disservice to them, right? And so
I think that people think that in theory, but I don't think that people, well, some people do.
I think some people do.
Some people do. But what I will say is that I don't imagine my mom will listen to this podcast, but my mom has met them a couple of times and like asks them questions about Eid and like, and does not bring up like Christianity or God. And so, and I obviously, I think that's like great, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What do you think about, because like for us in our house, like Annie and I probably won't be like, hey, here's the Quran, and we're probably not going to like necessarily say actively go explore other religions. Now, if our kids did that, that would be fine, I suppose. But also, like Annie and I, like with our friend Rabbi Josh, and like we have like interreligious friends where it's like we imagine they'll be exposed, and so I bring that up just to say like we're not going to hide anything from them. We probably won't like actively be like, hey, here's the Quran, just in case you want to explore it. But if they like picked it up, I think we'd be like, dive into it, like see what you think. But like for you, what do you think about that? Like again, aspirationally, or just like thinking in terms of like your thoughts on what other people that are parents are like. What do you think about that? Like the idea of like actively exposing your kids to other religions, or just kids in general, I guess.
Yeah, I struggle. There's a lot of times where I look at the like Christian Bible that we have, and I'll like, flip some pages. Sometimes I'm like, this is not a book for children. Yeah. Like I have that thought sometimes. And I think that the way you and Annie are like thoughtfully like having a conversation with your children is really great. I get stumped when it comes to the Bible. I don't know how I'm going to like
engage it,
introduce it. I feel very excited that like, cause personally, I don't read the Bible that often. I read and consume much more content about the Bible or about aspects of theology and spirituality than I'm more likely to do that than to like open up and start at page 1 or do a study, etc. So I don't know about how when it comes to like the personal. I like an idea of I'll probably like pray with my kids, meditate with them for like maybe spirituality examples, but also like it's a great like nervous system regulating tool. Yeah. Like breathing exercises, or if they're like emotionally dysregulated or like really upset about something, like that can be something that's like good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, actually that's one thing as a parent I wish I did better. Like I don't like pray with my kids a ton. Like we pray at meals and stuff. And some of this goes back to my own religious trauma now, even though we just talked about that and I was like, I don't have any. I do now remember as we're talking about this, like, and I think I can't remember if I ever said this on the podcast before, but I don't even know if I've told you, but like my mom like aggressively prayed over me to receive the gift of tongues when I was like 10. She had like a Pentecostal friend, and I don't know if my mom listens to this, but I would say at least in that phase of her life, I felt like we were kind of like spiritual chameleons. Like if someone was in our life influencing us, we would pick up on that. And there was this Pentecostal woman, and I remember being like trying to just pretend like I could do it so that I could get it over with, and like practicing in the shower, being like just like saying gibberish.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there was nothing Holy Spirit happening in this moment. But part of me, I think, goes back to that. It's like, and this does connect to last episode in terms of religious trauma. It's, I think I didn't grow up reading the Bible at all, and I didn't really crack it till seminary. And so maybe that's why I'm like, oh, we should read the Bible, right? And so I'm like trying to overcorrect. But then I also have this other thing where it's like, prayer, like you said, is really valuable. It has so many like spiritual, but also physical, psychological benefits. But I probably don't dive into that as much with my family. I do it personally because I can trust myself.
Yeah.
But I get nervous about doing it with my family because of what I saw happen negatively, which is interesting. I've not thought about that in a long time.
Yeah. I had a didn't plan on going here. The first time I ever saw my current chiropractor, I had like a really emotional experience.
Like just saw standing there.
No. Okay. Sorry. Oh, thank you for clarification.
Yeah.
I had an appointment. An appointment. No. Yeah, something about her appearance just like made me weep. No, but we were having an appointment, and we're both yappers, so we're just yap, touching, getting all the topics. Yeah. And somehow we started talking about like Santa Claus.
Okay.
And I had like whenever it was time for my mom to tell me that Santa, the way I knew Santa, is not real. And I was like processing, and I was like, what about the Easter Bunny? And she was like, no. And I was like, the Tooth Fairy? No.
Where does it end?
And so like full of like through my tears, I'm like, Mom, is God real? And she's like, of course God's real and blah, blah, blah. And that was when they were like, well, we got to tell Hallie now too, because we can't have my younger sister, we can't have her thinking, is God real or not? And I was like really having an emotional like remembering of that memory. And I think I couldn't really try and figure out why, because there was like a little bit of like panic, hopelessness, that I was like, I was really invested in this.
Yeah.
And it like, I don't know, like I have, even like in my body now, I feel like a tightening of like that really affected me, and I should probably delve more into that. But there was a different, and like to me as a kid, like this is not an anti-Santa rant, but like there was all of the things were resting on if God was real or not. Like that was the level of importance that I like placed on that out of fear. Yeah, sure. But like still. And so that was really a scary time for me. I was maybe like 8.
Yeah. I'm like super pro not talking about any of those things. I like, and not avoiding the topic. Like I think Santa and Easter, I think all those things should be told are fake from like immediate. I think it only does harm. It is.
That's a hot take.
Children's first moment in deconstruction. It's like you tell them something's true, and then they're like, "So I've been lied to," and then they have to start questioning everything around them because you. Again, this is a hot take, and it is a hot take. I don't open
because I don't have like a fully formed opinion on this because I go back and forth.
Yeah. Well, so we tell my kids believe in Santa.
Okay.
So I think it's only problematic. It never ends well because it will, whether expressed profoundly or really subversely, it causes levels of untrust and doubt, and it does lead to things like, can I trust my parents? Can I trust, like, is God real? Like you said, like it's not a vacuum of, okay, now Santa's not real. Like, or your kids are the a-hole that tell someone they're not. Like,
right.
And we don't know, like my kids are so sweet. They're like, and part of me is like, Knox knows it's not. I think he knows it's not. But it's one of those things like with religion where sometimes you look around too and you're like, I see things that tell me I don't think this is real, but I really want it to be real. You know what I mean? And I think that's where some kids get to, and then eventually they feel like they grow out of it. And I think that for people, this is not an indictment on atheists, but I think sometimes people that become atheists feel like their Christian faith was their last thing that they had to like grow out of, because we taught them through the years that you have these really spiritually held beliefs, which is what Santa and Easter and Tooth Fairy, like those are all spiritual things, even though they're not. Like as a kid, you feel them as that. Ooh. And then you eventually feel like, well, at some point I'm going to grow out of this thing. And I think we're teaching kids the wrong thing.
Okay, I'm gonna take this like comparison even further. There is even a tie in between like the belief and like, because like the belief in those things is also really important, and you're kind of like as a child, and you're kind of like maybe looked down upon if you don't believe in those things.
Yeah.
It's like in the movie Elf, his sleigh can't fly because not enough people believe.
Yeah.
So if you're like a kid watching that movie, you're like, well, shit, I better believe in Santa so his sleigh can fly.
Yeah.
And but we treat God the same way. It's like you better believe in God. Like, what the heck?
Or the cross won't fly. Quick caveat, disclaimer alert. I think if you teach your kids that Santa's real, I think you're wonderful, and I'm not trying to
send an angry email.
I personally
to him.
It. I'm out of both sides of my mouth on this. Like we probably more, and Annie, I love you if you're listening. Probably more because Annie would, and my ex-wife, I think are like pro. I don't want to be the one to ruin those things. Yeah. Like once the train leaves the station, you have to deal with it.
That's
but
true.
I do think that it's. I think if we were all being objective, and sometimes I pride myself on being able to be objective. I think if we were being objective, we would say there's no real benefit. Like the risk reward is not really there when all things are said and done.
What's Christmas morning like for your family? I don't really agree with that, because like
Christmas morning rocks. The kids love Santa.
There is a sense of magic that is like, it is lovely.
It is lovely. This episode will be titled "Is Santa Real?" By the way.
Oh, good.
There is magic, and there is. I guess for me, it's like the magic is there. I believe all those things are there, and I'm not the person that's like, this is like Santa's a demon and we're worshiping. Like I'm not that person.
Santa's capitalism. But we don't need to go down that route.
We don't. I really do think that it's tied up in my thoughts of how it leads to deconstruction. Actually, it's like it creates unhealthy habits about spiritual things. Is my biggest beef.
And there's also the whole issue of like, it matters if you obeyed your parents that year. Like that's kind of the tradition, is like that has a direct correlation on whether or not you receive a gift.
Gifts are heaven, coal is hell.
Yeah.
And you get what you reap what you sow, right?
That's true.
Yeah. I think it's problematic.
Deconstructing Santa Claus.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a new title. So if you listened and you turned it off, you said
Christmas in July, June.
Ooh. I think this will release in July.
That's great.
Yeah.
So it's thematic, is what we're saying.
Thematic, dramatic, asthmatic,
hydromatic.
What do you have to say? I somewhat feel like I just ran a bunch of wind sprints about Santa, and I've run out of energy.
Well, okay. I think that we are all going
to heaven.
And I think we are all doing our best when it comes to parenting.
Yeah. Yes. 100%.
I think, and I even love what you said specifically about like that one day your kids will deconstruct from the structure that you raised them in. Like that is it's kind of just the circle of life, if you will, is like, but what I also believe is that hopefully each generation we're like doing it a little better, and that's the goal of, I think, in my opinion, that's the goal of progressivism as a concept. Yeah. Capital P progressivism is like to just do better than what we've been given.
Yeah, we're always progressing, right?
We're always progressing. And I am going to quote the Barbie movie. What happened to you? Oh, no. Zoom in on your face for that one. Okay, this is a quote from the Barbie movie. we mothers stand still so that our daughters can look back to see how far they've come.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've thought that way about, I have deconstructed from church, from like what it means to be a woman with sexuality. But there is a specific deconstruction that we kind of do, like a reparenting. And I have done that from my parents, but it's also worthwhile noting that like they have also done that to an extent. Like they have done that from their upbringing. Like, because my mom and I have had a conversation where like there are things that she did intentionally in hopes to like make my experience better than the one that she had. And my mom, like my grandparents are great, like they love, it's been love the whole way through. But no matter how much you love your kids, no matter how much you try to believe all the right things and like tell them the right things, like they're still going to deconstruct from the way that you parent them.
Yeah. And I think your definition of capital P progressivism is the right way to look at it. It's like we're deconstructing always, because that's life. Like I was just talking to someone that shot me a message on Facebook, saw a comment on a post I made and wanted to ask me more. And I was like, Jesus deconstructed in the Bible. Like,
oh yeah.
And
the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah. And it's not as taboo of a topic as we think. And progressing has always been a part of what we're doing.
Yeah. If you ever changed your mind on something, you've deconstructed.
Yeah. And I think the negative is, and I don't hear you saying this, I hear you saying the opposite, is like there is no finish line. Like we're always being formed into the image of God more. We're always being formed in the understanding of our beliefs more. We're always growing. We're always parenting better, being parented better, like being better friends, being better, all of the things. And like even the term better I don't love, but like we're always growing.
Yeah.
And I think the hard thing is like there's certain sects of Christianity and parents and theology and all of these things where it's like, I mean, fundamentalism is the absence of progress. It's we've arrived at perfect belief of everything. And there's fundamentalist parents, there's fundamentalist Christians, there's fundamentalist progressives, there's fundamentalist everything. And it's like that's what I think we don't want to become in any of this when it talks relating to like our kids.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking about this is I think somewhat related. I've never worked for someone younger than me. I was just thinking about this. Like I've had a lot of staff in my life that are older than me and younger than me, but I've never worked for someone younger than me. And I was just thinking about like how beneficial that day will be in my life where like there's someone that I'm working for that has like the leadership position over me. Like I've never had that in my life. And it was like a scary initial thought. And because I was like, that means that I won't be the whateverist in the room.
Yeah.
And it's probably, that doesn't even mean that's true, but then you go to like the smartest or the whatever. But I was like, if we're always progressing, that means that someone older, younger, and the same age always has something to offer me. And I think that's the cool thing that I look forward in that, which was kind of scary to me. Like thinking of like my kids, right? Like someday maybe one of them does become a pastor. Like be cool to work with them someday. Like,
yeah.
For them or someone their age. That'd be kind of cool. But a weird thought. I've never done that before. I've been the young person.
Yeah. Right.
And I made a bunch of mistakes, and the people that were older than me, around me, or like being led by me were so gracious. Like they allowed me. Like they knew they were better leaders in the second chair than I was in the first chair. And like that was very interesting and like helpful for me as a person.
Yeah. I have up to where I am now, a lot of times I've been the youngest person in the room. And so I think that's going to be really interesting as like I have no other life experience than being usually the youngest person on staff, usually the most like crazy.
Yeah.
Keep her contained.
So did I until I hired you. Like that.
Yeah.
You were the first time I remember when I hired you, you were the age I was when I started the gathering. And like that was a mind grenade for me as well. Like being like, oh man, like I'm crossing the horizon into a different phase of my life that I didn't even realize I was. Like mid-30s came faster than I thought they would come.
But what I would say, and this is taking an interesting turn because we're kind of just talking about growing up, like as we transition from being the youngest person in the generation to now I think I feel more sure of myself than I thought that I ever would or could, which is surprising. And
why do you think that is?
I think for the most part, if I look at my life, I mostly do what I want to do. And I don't mean that in a like, I don't care about anyone else.
Yeah,
but I just mean that like my jobs I love and I would do for free and I have done for free.
You've heard it here first, people. I'm just joking. Is that one of those jokes?
No, it was like just I don't even know. But
you would do them for free. You have done them.
I have done them for free. Like I hang out with the people that I want to hang out with. I don't in this life. There's not, or where I'm at right now this season. There's not much that I do that I like. Would rather not be doing this, and that's great.
It's a good place.
Did I have a point at this to the story?
You're talking about being like self-assured, self-confident, kind of like. And part of that being like, you look around and you're doing the things you want, which I think is great. Like, and I think that's true about you. Like, I don't see you begrudgingly doing things very often that you're like, oh, I hate my life when I have to do this. Like, I think the sessions team of annual conference was the closest I've seen you come to that. And I think by the end of it, you're like, this is great. And you know how you can make it better next year, which is what I appreciate about your personality is like, you may not like something, but I think you'd be like, well, then how can we make it a better version of this rather than being like, I'm throwing it out, you know? Mm-hmm. Not to say it wasn't bad, but I think it was just a lot. It was different than what you
said. It was a lot. It was a lot. But mostly I think that I want to keep doing this thing of like taking it all in, you know, being thoughtful about how I talk to everybody, because I think that's going to be important as like eventually like I'll be someone's boss probably. And in a smaller way, like younger photographers reach out to me. They like have questions or they want advice. They want business advice. People want business advice from me. Like that.
Give it to them.
And I do, but like, and like that feels kind of weird. So like, but I just hope that, and I imagine that will be good. I'm excited for it. I'm still gonna be like looking around and asking for advice for sure, but
yeah. And I hope we always are, right, in the seasons of life, like always offering. I said this to someone at annual conference, like I think you were there in this conversation, maybe it was at my house, but I feel like an obligation to try to like have other people preach that aren't me, because I didn't get as many reps when I was a young, newly formed preacher. And whether that's like LGBTQ people that don't often get their voices elevated in the church, or women, or just young people that are like haven't paid their dues. Mm-hmm. I remember being on the side of like, I want an opportunity. And so I often feel like that's my job. And I hope we're always doing that. I'm like looking to see how we're creating space, but also in your space, like understanding like I have value to offer someone else. Like you may be having others above you creating space for you, but you still have the opportunity to create space for others. It's like always a two-way thing, and we're kind of in the middle of both all the time. Yeah.
I think what I hear you saying is like when you're sure of yourself, sometimes you can also believe in other people before they maybe feel that. And I can do that in a way with volunteers. You know, if they are stepping into, if they're like offering themselves to serve or do something, but they're like, I'm not sure yet, or I might not be good enough. Be like, well, let's try it.
Yeah. It's like a love your neighbor as yourself thing, right? Like you love yourself well. You trust yourself. You believe in yourself. Like you can love others and help them do the same thing.
Yeah. And kids.
That's
what we're talking about.
It is. I really enjoyed this conversation, actually. It went different places than I thought it was going to go, but I do think all interconnected to like where the task was, which I think is just like how are we raising up new generations of people. And sometimes those new generations, like when I was at the gathering, one of the things we would say, our mission statement was something to the effect of like raising up new generations of people that follow Jesus. Mm-hmm. But we would be like, new generations doesn't just mean young people. It means like generations that were typically excluded. So that could be people of color or women or LGBTQ people, or whatever. Like we want to be in the forefront of like inspiring, compelling communities for new people, period.
Yeah. I think for a part 2, we should bring your children in and interview them.
I've talked about that, actually. I think if you'd be interested, I would bring them in one time and we could do that this summer.
Let us know. I mean, I know them, so I think it would be, they wouldn't feel like stranger.
I think we would do it. I think you guys can let us know. I'll put it so we can do a Spotify poll on every episode. Okay. And I'll put that on. Like, if you'd be interested, I think it could be a really fun one to have them on. Annie and I have talked about doing it, and maybe she could come and join us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And put what questions you would want Danny's children to answer. They're like, which one in this room, who do you trust the least?
Yeah. What happened when you realized Santa Claus wasn't real and then watched tears fall down your face?
Right. Yeah. Subscribe to the Patreon if you want to see Danny tell his children that Santa isn't real.
Yeah, I'm going to also have to put a disclaimer on this, like not suitable for kids.
Right.
Because there's so much Santa talking.
Ask questions, but don't take all the joy out of their life. Okay.
Yeah. Listen to this one in AirPods around your family.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Sadie.
It's been fun. Send us out with what?
Whatever you want.
All right. I'll sing as a kid song. Jesus loves me, this I know. For the Bible tells me so. Little ones to him belong. The song is longer than I realized. So they are weak, but Jesus loves you.
Hey, friends. Don't forget.
Embrace the journey. I forgot about the second part. I was like, am I going to do the chorus? I don't want to.